So we were desperate, so he said he would come in tonight.
That's right.
Okay. So let me do this. I'm going to take maybe 20, 25 minutes, and again, I sent out 3 different challenges that people will make against Christianity. If we don't get all 3, I don't care. Just whatever you want to cover, and some of the things I want to say about it. So here's the first one, and you'll hear things like this. I was going to ask you, what are these kinds of rules that you hear people? Alan said, I got to stay off this mic. First thing I do is I step on the mic. He tells me, we're picking up a lot of mic noise. And so, okay, so I step on it immediately. Yeah, technology. So what do you think they're referring to when people say, oh, you Christians, you got all these do's and don'ts? What kinds of do's and don'ts do you think? Now, I'm not saying argue against it yet. I mean, just what are the do's and don'ts you think are the stereotypical ideas people have about Christianity? Whatever they're doing. So that's on the not to do list. Is that what you said? Yeah. One time somebody defined a Puritan as somebody that's afraid that somewhere somebody's having a good time. So maybe that's part of it. What else? Any particular rules that you can think of? Yeah, Patty.
When I went to Biola in 1960, we had to sign a contract that we wouldn't smoke, we wouldn't drink, we wouldn't dance, we wouldn't go with any of the boys that did. We had a little jingle.
I don't drink, I don't chew, and yeah, I don't drink, I don't chew, and I don't go with the girls that do. Yeah. Okay, so you got, what was that again, Pay? So dancing was out, and what else? Smoking. Drinking.
Oh, we couldn't go to movies.
Movies, okay. Cards. Yeah, see, in my family, I came from a really standard Christian family. They went to Emanuel Faith a long time ago. And for them, the big thing was cards, and so you could do Rook. You guys know Rook? Some of you are laughing. Oh, now that I'm an adult, I go, why? What's the difference? I don't get it. I guess because you associate, the regular playing cards with Las Vegas or something. But, man, they sit around all evening slapping down those Rook cards, and they got pretty serious about that. But no, not the cards that have clubs and hearts and all that kind of stuff. Anything else you can think of that would be on the list? Yeah.
Commit adultery, which is rampant.
Yeah.
Don't or honor your parents, which is kind of a problem today. So
yeah.
Those are Christianity rules that the world is kind of saying we don't buy into that. It's okay to swear. It's okay to do adultery. You don't have to honor your parents. You can lie all you want.
Yeah. There's one Bible that got misprinted one time, and people laughed about it because it said, "Thou shalt not admit adultery." Legit, I think it really did came out that way. Thou shalt not admit adultery. Yeah.
My friend's mom, when she was going to Bible school, good Christian girls didn't wear red except for the Holy Spirit Day.
They had a Holy Spirit Day, and they would not wear red unless. What's that?
It was AG, so.
Okay.
The Holy Spirit Day, I don't remember what it was, but that's when they wear red. Otherwise, good girls don't wear red.
They don't wear red. How about makeup? Was that a big thing? And jewelry. Movies, yeah. And what? Pants. Couldn't wear pants. Yeah, my dad came from the Nazarene background, and I know they were just, death as far as jewelry goes and all that stuff. Bowling alleys. Okay.
The rules the same as what Christ criticized the Jews for the Pharisees.
Bowling?
No.
I missed that verse somewhere. Yeah.
So the criticism that Christ had of the Sadducees and the Pharisees, thousands of laws they made up that aren't in the Bible.
Yeah.
Well, Christianity did the same.
Wait a minute. So you're saying it does do that, or it's how people see that? You say Christianity has it?
Commandments, we can't even follow those.
Yeah. Are you saying somewhere there are lists as far as churches go these days? No, I ask it first. What are you hearing from the stereotypical view? Now, some of you, I guess, did grow up that way, and you had a lot of. No. Yeah. Well, I think you already touched on something though, which was As far as the Ten Commandments go, that's the one set of rules they all know about. But let me go ahead. I'm going to skip ahead here for just a minute. You were talking about the Jews.
Well, I'm saying
Yeah.
the hundreds of rules that they had. Like Sabbath.
Yeah.
In Israel, you can't push a button on the elevator in Sabbath because it's considered work.
Yeah.
And that's a rule.
Yeah.
Wearing red, that's a rule. Dancing, that's a rule.
The last I heard, it was something like over 600 rules. Because the rabbis would all sit around and say, "What does it mean to keep the Sabbath holy?" And you're right, Jesus went after those big time. Can I heal somebody on the Sabbath? Oh no, that was not a good idea. Really? Was the Sabbath made for man or man made for the Sabbath? And so you had all of these issues going on as well.
Romans 13, if you're speeding, oh no.
Yeah.
Bad witness to your kids because you're breaking the law.
Yeah.
You're familiar with Romans 13?
Yeah. Right.
Look at all the secular laws.
Okay, but let's talk about the church laws. I mean, what do you say to somebody who says, "You guys with all these rules, I'm free. I don't need to follow all these things." You think of religion, with being a bunch of do's and don'ts. So now you've made a big list for me, so that's good. So what do we say? Do we just say, "Yeah, you're right"? I mean, is there anything we can say? No.
We follow the Bible, we believe in Christ, we sin and we're forgiven. And we try not to sin and people are people, so we make up stuff.
Yeah.
Christians are people too.
Yeah. Legalism just kind of takes over kind of a creeping thing, doesn't it? I mean, it's like there must be a lot of stuff we should be doing. Yeah, Don?
A lot of them today, too, they also say that.
But a lot of people say it. That's them.
No, a lot of people think that as Christians, we are the Bible today, and they see us doing bad things.
Yeah.
And I've seen that a lot where we're walking around being a Christian, and then they claim that, look, that guy's supposed to be a Christian, and look what he's doing.
Yeah.
A lot of that takes place.
Sure. And that's another category, isn't it, to say, "Oh, you Christians are hypocrites." And then now we're down in that area. Yeah.
So when somebody brings something like this up, there's a whole category here where I try to bring up, well, there's Christendom, which is the people that call themselves Christians that basically try to drive media experience and stuff. But then there's the Christ followers, Christians. Sometimes they'll buy that, and you can go on and discuss Christianity as this. Sometimes they won't, and then in that case, I'll fall back to I'm just a Christ follower. There's a lot of rules out there. There's a lot of group of people that call themselves Christians. So this is the way I follow Christ, and then try to disassociate from a lot of the baggage that comes with the current nomenclature.
Yeah. So just because people claim to be Christians doesn't necessarily mean they are Christians. Anything else you can say on something like that, Louise?
Well, I think we get off track a little bit when we start counting the different things that various kinds of Christians or churches want to put off limits. But I think if somebody told me that their objection is there are too many rules, I would say there are rules everywhere in life. When you're a child, your household has rules. Your parents make rules. They make them for your own good. When you go to school, there are rules.
Mm-hmm.
When you take a job, there are rules. Everywhere in society, there are rules, and the key is: are the rules reasonable? And are they rules you must follow? Are the ones that we are concerned about as Christians are not so much rules; they are what God established for us as what is actually good for us. Nothing that God prescribed is good for us.
Yeah.
And so the rules that God made clear to us are actually the things that are more likely to result in our having a relationship with Him and having a good life and affecting people around us for good.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'd want to know, well, what ones are you objecting to? And I think usually it's those things we think of as the moral rules.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Yes.
So, in the New Testament, the rules are: you should love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy mind, with all thy soul, and love our neighbor as ourselves. And if we do those, then we choose the things that we do after that with those things in mind. The we love our neighbor as ourselves, then we're not going to be hurting people. We're not going to be stealing from people. We're not going to be gossiping about people.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I mean, those are the basic rules, and then you do those things to stay within.
Yeah. Yeah, I always think, too, as Christians, we're not doing the rules to get saved. We've already been saved, and we appreciate what God's done for us. And then in turn, we go out and we do things for others or whatever it is. So it's not like, man, I got all these things I got to check off, because that's what God is telling me I have to do. Oh, man, look at all the things I have to do this week. This is not a complete list, but I went online and just typed in Mormon rules. And, just be baptized and confirmed in the church, receive the laying on of hands, receive the temple endowment, be married, love and worship God, love your neighbor, repent of your sins. By the way, I don't see anything bad with these, do you? I mean, these are not horrific or anything. Follow the rules of chastity, pay honest tithes, be honest, speak the truth always, conduct ordinances for the dead. Okay, that heads off the track. Maybe they'll keep the Sabbath holy, attend church regularly, love your family and strengthen them in the Lord, have daily family prayer, honor your parents, teach the gospel to others, study the scriptures, listen, obey the inspired words of leaders in the church. So, again, it's not that those are really bad things, but I mean, if you look at the philosophy behind the Mormon teachings there, the religion, it's you better do these things because Jesus, in a sense, he kind of like repackaged your debt. He's sort of like a finance guy. And so you now owe Jesus. That's the idea. So, he did die for you on the cross, but now you've transferred the debt that you owed God to Jesus, and you got to pay him back. And that's what you have to do. And that's just part of it. And I think you can always talk to a Mormon sometime and rattle off a few of these. And the idea is you better do all of them, not just try. You've got to succeed in these things. Well, who can succeed? What a burden. No wonder people have left the Mormon church. Some of it's because of the mythology and all behind it, but a lot of it's this huge burden, which the same thing you're talking about with the Jewish burden of 600 plus sins. Who in the world can live like that? And so I think we ought to stress the freedom that's in Jesus. In fact, let me give you a couple of verses here. I'm going to scoot on because we've already talked about these things. In the book of James, for example, this is what James says. Religion, okay, so what is religion? According to James, he says that God our Father accepts. What does he accept as pure and faultless? Look after orphans and widows and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. I don't see a whole lot of rules and regulations there. And if you say, well, what would it mean to be, not polluted by the world? Let me hit one more verse here. Here's Paul. This is from 1 Corinthians 10. He says, everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. Isn't that interesting, the way he put that? And then he repeated that, so I won't put it up there. But he says, everything is permissible, but not everything is constructive. Eat anything sold in the meat market. So don't sit there and agonize about, well, what have they told me about the, rules for foods and stuff. He says, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all to the glory of God. Don't cause anyone to stumble. I mean, that's one area. You don't want to drink in front of somebody who has a drinking problem or whatever it is. You don't want to cause somebody to stumble. But, I mean, do you see the freedom in something like that? And, I'm really happy to talk freedom with people as opposed to a whole lot of rules. I hope you don't feel like you go through every day mentally trying to check off all these things because God's done it for us. And he's given us this kind of freedom that we have. I think it's a pretty neat thing. Let me do one more, and then we'll turn it over to Josh here. I gave you another. Oh, I forgot. Anyway, let's skip over. I said other religions depend on rules. By the way, don't you think it's the reason all these other religions have rules is that's how you get to God? Jesus is not God, so at least in their book, so you better do something to get up there. There's no savior for you. You just suck it up and pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You got to do it yourself. It is. They're all that way. Everything except Christianity. And I think we have to point that out to people that talk about, all the rules and regulations. No, not really. It's the others that have that big checklist. If you're into Islam, what do you have? The 5 pillars. You better take that Hajj, do that trip. You better do all these things. You got to pray and all that kind of stuff. It's a must to. You've got to. If you want to have enough deeds, on the day of judgment to weigh it one way or another, depending how God's going to like you or not like you, you better pile up those deeds. Jehovah's Witnesses, are they out witnessing because they just love you? It's to do. They've got to do this stuff. And so you get group after group like that, very different than Christianity. I like this one. Let me do one more here. Have you heard this one? This is another biggie. Very popular these days. Oh, I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. Any thoughts about that one? Greg Kokel there. What do you... Yeah. That's the first step. What do you think they mean when they say that? It's obviously an anti-religious comment in a way, don't you think? In fact, are we back to maybe talking about the rules? That's one of the things. Oh, I don't have to obey all those, rules that you've imposed on me. I can be spiritual. Anything else you think of when you think of that?
The typical person saying this is that I don't need to go to your church. I don't need to. Let's face it. Within Christianity, there's 8,000 different sects of Christianity. So I mean, I don't have to belong to that. I can have spirituality myself. It's everyone's their own God and all that whole that stuff. What do you call it? The New Age stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's semantics. I can be very spiritual. The Spirit of God is in me. Does that mean I have to go to church? No. Does it mean I want to go to church? Usually.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
So essentially, they're saying that they're their own moral compass.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, by saying that I'm spiritual, not religious, they're saying their religion is one.
Yeah.
They're their own religion.
Yeah, exactly. It's really postmodern, isn't it? Which says you have your truth, I have my truth. I don't want to buy into a system. I mean, this is very, very individualistic, like you're talking about. I'll decide what makes me religious in my own way by being spiritual. So this is really the spirit of the times, I guess, that we're living in. The catch is that truth is not like this, is it? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. If you buy into postmodernism, there are no truths. But I think we got to bring people back to, well, Jesus either really did what he claimed to do or he didn't, or the Mormons were either right or wrong, or Buddhism is either right or wrong. But it's so fuzzy, isn't it? Frankly, I wouldn't say this to somebody, but doesn't it strike you as kind of a lazy way? In other words, like you said, there are a lot of denominations. So I don't want to think about who's got the truth. I don't want to investigate religions. I don't want to look at holy books. I don't want to look at the founders of the religion. I don't want to consider manuscript evidence. Forget all that stuff. I'll just do what I feel like doing. Well, that's kind of a lazy approach, considering your soul is on the line. I mean, isn't that something that they would rather spend their time watching TV or something, but they don't want to dig into religions because we talked about that last week. There are huge differences between these religions. And a comment like this, I'm spiritual but not religious, says I'm not going to investigate any of that. Yeah.
So I agree that they don't want to dig in, right? So in my experience, people that say this are acknowledging that they understand that there's something larger than this life, right? So I usually use that as an opening, not as a turn on. When they say I'm spiritual, not religious, and then I try to help them decide on tools so that they could pick if they wanted to, right? Because I don't think most people have been educated on the basic concept. The one I like is fruit inspection. Well, what's the outcome of this person and the way they're doing that? What's the outcome of this group? How do you judge the group, right? You can't pick you can't. There's all sorts of books that claim to be from. So how do you start as somebody with nothing, and pick? You've got to look at how people's lives are. Are they happier? Are they better? What are you going to use, and what are your and walk them through some basic criteria if they wanted to, right? And rather than assuming they're not, I just assume they lack the tools.
There's a real simple book that's been out a long, long time. It's called So What's the Difference? And it looks at different religions and gives you kind of a quick once-over on it. A long time ago, Steve and I did something that was called, I think it was Religions 101, a book. So, I mean, there are things like that out there that can begin to distinguish between the different religions. I've got a talk if you ever want to go to my website called Can We Test Religions? And there are ways to test it. A lot of people don't think you can test a religion. You can test bus stops, are they there and do the buses show up on time? But they don't think you can test religions. And like I think you were talking about, you end up with a God that you like. So that God is going to be the one that is okay with what you do. And it doesn't really answer the big questions of life, does it? I mean, what happens when you die? To say you're spiritual, what does that mean? I mean, where are you going to end up when you die? Are you going to reincarnate? Then you're buying into one religion. Are you going to just lie on the ground? That's a different view. Are you going to go to heaven? I mean, what's going to happen to you? I like this response. This was Greg Kokel. He said he's heard this a lot, and he said he wants to say to people, if they ever say I'm spiritual, not religious, to say, of course you are. God made you that way. We're all spiritual beings. Ecclesiastes said the eternity was planted in us, and so that's a good way to kind of build a bridge before you get into Christianity and why it's better than other views. But you're making a connection by saying that. Of course you are, and then you can go from there and talk about them that way. All right, so let me pause at this time. We'll skip the judgmental thing. I'll go past it. Don't pay attention. Oops. There. Okay, there's the one I wanted to get to. So Josh Rose, a couple of things real fast about him. He's a Pasadena boy. All right, so Pasadena, California. Youth pastor. I didn't realize this. He served up at EV Free up in Fullerton. And he was in Arizona as a youth pastor, and then he came here, so he's got a tremendous background. And he still looks okay, having dealt with youth all these years. He doesn't have a tick in his eye or anything. He's doing really, really well. Married to Beth, if you know Beth, real sweet gal. They have 3 kids. Okay, so this is just sort of, ho-hum. There's Josh's biography. Well, I asked Josh, I said, you got anything else you want to tell us a little more interesting than that? So he says, all right. He majored, now catch this, in his undergraduate, he majored in philosophy at Biola. All right. Yeah. He goes off to seminary. His first class in philosophy, he fails.
That's right. That happened. That did happen.
I just love that one. I thought it was a great story. I'm a philosophy major. What?
That happened.
I don't get it. I don't understand this.
I went to Fuller Seminary.
Fuller.
Yeah.
Fuller. But we don't hold that against him.
Better
news than that. If you want to talk to him sometime, he'll introduce you to the Kardashians.
Yeah, that's right.
This is legit. I thought he was kidding me. He is related to the Kardashians. So,
Here you go. All Armenians are. He says yes. Okay. So now I have to explain that before we switch over to my slides. I do have to explain a few of these things, and it's so good to be here. Oh no, you're okay. We switched. All right, good. Or did I do that?
I turned this off.
Oh, you turned it off? All right. So I did. I was a philosophy major, and so I went, of course, to Fuller. And seminary is just a whole nother ball game. I mean, once you're, especially, and Fuller's a very academic school, and I went and took way too many classes, and I thought that the philosophy class would be my easiest one because I knew it and I understand it, and so I waited till the end, and then I failed. Oh my goodness, I've never failed a class in my life. It was a philosophy class. It was a great class. I learned a ton. But who taught that class? I don't remember the name of the professor.
That's all right. You didn't remember the other stuff.
I didn't remember anything. I know. Didn't remember anything. I'd have to look that up. I know. And I tried to forget that until times like this when we were kind of talking philosophy. And then we actually do share the famous Kardashians actually share a great aunt. So we actually did invite Kardashians to our wedding. Not the famous ones. I've never met them. My mom grew up hanging out. She's kind of cousins with their parents. So there you go. But, I still don't get any other perks from that other than be able to say that every now and again. Well, I have had some fun today, or this week, as I've been kind of thinking about this and looking at this, and this has been a blast for me because I don't get to do this kind of teaching all that often. I get to do a bunch of preaching that's very different, and so I kind of dug deep, and I'm tried to put this together like a philosophy argument. As if it were a philosophy paper that I'm presenting to you. Now, I have not put together that much detail as this is a paper, but I've got hopefully some good material for you, and I'm looking forward to this. What I'm doing today is I'm calling it the argument of love from love. Okay, I didn't put that on the title screen, but the argument from love, and this is an argument that has been done before. Now, I've not seen it done exactly this way. I don't know that I've seen it done quite like this. It's been referred to a bunch. C.S. Lewis refers to it. N.T. Wright wrote a book called Simply Christian, which actually talks about it generally as well. But the argument it can be an argument for the existence of God. I'm sort of using this as an argument for the reliability of the biblical Christian worldview. And so it's an inductive argument, though. That means that the strength of the argument, it's not an argument that can be valid or invalid. It's either strong or weak. And it's strong if the premises are true. So based on how strong each premise is in the argument. So you'll see I've got some premises there and then a conclusion. And then the conclusion will be strong if the premises are true. So we'll see if I can show these premises to be true. All right? That's really the point. Okay. So we're gonna begin with premise number 1, that the most universal desire of the human being is to love and be loved. Now, this is one that sounds true to a lot of people. In fact, I think that it has sounded true to people in all different regions all over the world. And that I want to show you as I try to get a sample, illustration of quotes from people who have said such things. Let's go back to Plato. He whom love does not touch walks in darkness. Love is valuable, right? If not, we walk in darkness. How about Gandhi? Love is the strongest force the world possesses, and yet it is the humblest imaginable. Love is the strongest force. Even Gandhi says that. How about Freud? Love and work and love. That's all there is. Love and work are the cornerstones of our humanness. Okay, now he's adding one to it, and but at least it's important enough, even for Freud. I think Freud was very mistaken about what love is. I'm not going there. I'm just saying at least he is recognizing how important in general the concept is. Pope John Paul II, of course. We cannot live without love. If we do not encounter love, if we do not experience it and make it our own, if we do not participate intimately in it, our life is meaningless. It's a strong statement about love. And, of course, he's coming from a similar biblical worldview as us, and there's clear reasons why he would say that, and I think they'd be very similar to our own. Dr. Seuss even. Like, we're going the full spectrum here. You're in love when you don't want to fall asleep because reality is finally better than your dreams. What a profound statement about love, though. That the reality of being in love is better than your dreams. Love is the thing that everybody hopes for and longs for. Yeah.
I have worked for several general managers and news directors who didn't give a rip about being loved or not even being liked. What do you answer to that?
If there are individuals who are broken in our world. No, people who did not. The question was, what about people who did not give a rip about love? And I would tell you that deep down their life is meaningless, as Pope John Paul says. That they're missing out on something major. And I think typically that we see that in the way that they behave. And so, in fact, we find that people are not able to even live isolated from anyone, from community. When they are, there's all sorts of problems that come. They go crazy.
Yeah, people that haven't found love, they try to replace it with worldly.
Yes. And they do try to replace it with power. They do try to replace it, and often, though, it is even the love of power, which is interesting, because it is not actual power that they crave. They actually loving something else. And now they're basically replacing an inanimate object for something that should be personal and human. But it is specifically, I'm saying, the love of others. So I'm not talking about love in general here. Because you can, I guess in theory, you can love a thing. You can love yourself even. And I'm not talking about that kind of love. And I don't think any of these people are. And I don't think any of the people that have spoken about love, which we can go on and on with these, and I'm not done yet. The Dalai Lama, okay, just looking at different worldviews, right? Love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot exist. An ancient African proverb, love is a despot who spares no one. Interesting. Think about that one. It doesn't spare anybody, and it destroys us, and it's so powerful in us, but it doesn't spare anybody. And then, of course, the wise theologians, the Beatles, all you need is love, right? Okay, now, this, and of course, okay, my argument is as strong as these premises. Is love the most universal desire? Okay? Now, this is in generalities too. You're going to find antisocial people, right, that do not find love. There's going to be examples of this. But not only just to be loved, well, that is a huge desire, but there is a huge desire to actually give ourselves in love to another person. And actually, this is true today. Even now, in a world where divorce rates are higher than ever, okay, there's all sorts of abuse and scandals around marriage and around those things, right? There's all sorts of things as it's N.T. Wright who says, marriages apparently made in heaven sometimes end not far from hell. Marriage does not have it's a great rap these days in general. However, do you realize that marriage, I want to suggest to you, even marriage is still quite popular today. Marriage is still quite popular. And let me just explain why I think, and this goes to the point that you know, the most universal desire of the human being is to love and be loved. I think that marriage is very popular, even though divorce rates are so high, and even though there's a lot of infighting and marital problems and all that stuff. And let me just say, these numbers are from 2016, the best data I could find. And the average wedding cost then $32,329. The average wedding, okay? That means there's some more, a few less like mine. And I'm guessing yours. But there were almost 2.5 million weddings in 2016. It was a little bit less than that in 2016. And that means, you realize this, that the annual cost of weddings, the annual amount of the wedding industry, it yields $72 billion every year. $72 billion every year. Okay, now that that's a big number for all of us, but I just want to put that into comparison. Okay, to compare 72 billion to a few other things. Okay, for instance, the NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball combined, all three of them, they bring in $26 billion. All three of them. The U.S. box office, all movies that are seen in a year in 2016 brought in $12 billion. Do you know what's even bigger than these? Video games. Video games brought in $30 billion in the year 2016. And even all those three together are only $68 billion, right? That means that weddings, I think, are quite popular. That people are looking for something, and yes, they are shows of affection, and they are literally shows at times, but it's dreams that people are buying into because deep down, there's a desire to love and be loved, is the point. Now, I think that's the simple explanation for all this, is that there is a deep desire, and I think that it is universal, crosses cultures, crosses languages, and so that's premise number one. Now, premise number two is a credible worldview. Now, a credible meaning that it is reasonable. worth believing in. I could use the word trustworthy, worth putting your weight on, to use Pastor Dennis's, right? This is a credible worldview. Should be able to explain, basically what I'm saying, it should be able to explain, number one, should be able to explain and encourage our most universal desire, okay? Now, and I'm suggesting two things, not just that it should explain it, but a worldview should actually be encouraging what is that basic desire, all right? If that is a universal desire, if that is something about humans that is, then a credible worldview should actually explain and encourage them all. It should provide an explanation and an encouragement of love. And in particular, the love of other people. A strange love. If you're looking for the best belief system, you should look to the one that best explains this phenomenon of love. And I want to look at a few belief systems to see how they explain. Okay, so under this, we're going to start by looking at the physicalist worldview. I can't go into all of them. Once again, the strength of this is on what I can show. I'm not going to show all of them. I'm going to choose really evolutionary sciences. Okay, evolutionary science, I don't believe, does not adequately explain or encourage the love of other. In fact, evolutionary science, which is of course the best explanation of a naturalist worldview, has absolutely no place for love in it. In fact, if you were an alien that came down to Earth and you studied about humans by reading evolutionary scientific research books, I think if you showed up here and met real humans, you would find love to be a complete surprise, especially sacrificial love. People giving of themselves for other people, people laying down their lives for other people, would be a phenomenon that just wouldn't ever cross your mind in reading an evolutionary scientific book at all, because the main goal is the survival of the fittest, is perpetuate your own species and all of those things. And so there's plenty of people who agree, people like Darwin. If it could be proved that any part of the structure of any species had been formed for the good of another species, it would annihilate my theory, for such could not have been produced by natural selection. If there's something that is done for the good of other people, okay? And I want to suggest love is this very thing, that we love and we do that and we choose to do that, which is purely for the good of other people. And I don't think they do a great job of explaining why that is. Now, there are plenty of evolutionary theorists who do explain the phenomenon of love. Okay, and they'll say that it has to do with herd instinct, or it has meaning that you care for your tribe, and it's really the propagation of your own species, and so we do these things. And sure, that's okay, but I really don't think, and I think they try to explain it. I don't think it does a good job, and it definitely doesn't encourage love. Love is not encouraged in that system. In fact, I think the best illustration of the full outflow of evolutionary theory tends to be the stuff that the stuff of eugenics, the stuff of Hitler even. As you look at how that theory combined with all sorts of other philosophy ended up leading the wrong way. Richard Dawkins, okay, another well-known atheist, says universal love and the welfare of the species as a whole are concepts which simply do not make evolutionary sense. He goes on to say, and this is in the Selfish Gene, he says, disinterested altruism is something that has no place in nature. Okay, disinterested altruism is just people doing things for other people, not getting nothing out of it. Something that has never existed before in the whole history of the world, he's saying. Basically saying in evolution, before humans, this didn't happen, is what he's saying. And so he can't explain it. Thus, evolutionary science does not adequately explain or encourage the love of others. And as C.S. Lewis wisely says, if I find in myself desires which nothing in this world can satisfy, the only logical explanation is that I was made for another world, right? Now, I want to adapt this a little bit and say that if I find in myself desires which cannot be explained by a naturalist worldview, the only logical explanation is that I was made for and by something supernatural, okay? Beyond nature is what we need to go to. And so let's look at some supernatural worldviews. And we're going to look at some. We're going to look at a few of them. Once again, I cannot spend the time looking at all of them. I'm going to look at 3 other supernatural worldviews, hoping to be looking at different areas of the world to try to get a general sample. But non-Christian supernatural, this is 2B, supernatural worldviews do not adequately explain and encourage love. Okay, this is what I want to try to argue. Okay, let's start with Buddhism. I think Buddhism this is a bit of an easy one because the ultimate goal of Buddhism is nirvana, right? Okay, and the state of nirvana is reaching a state of losing all sense of self and kind of combining with everyone else in a sense as in the one. And I really think that it's ultimately saying there is no other. And so love actually gets in the way of nirvana because love is one of the things that you can't hold on to too tightly. You want to be loosely held on to it. You cannot hold on to it in Buddhism. So there is no other, so there is no really love of other. That's not encouraged, ultimately not at all. Some of the people do encourage it in the short term, but ultimately they have to say that it's not the ultimate reality. Hinduism, and so I'm going to cross out Buddhism. Sorry, Buddhism. Hinduism. In Hinduism, love is actually one of the gods. There is a God of love. And all I have to point out, though, is that love does have a high role, but so does Shiva the destroyer, is an equal role. Hanuman, the monkey god. And so many more. There are many different gods that all have different, similar levels of appreciation there. And that just means that love does not have a priority above, or it does not show how it is the main human desire. It's just one of many in Hinduism. So I'm going to cross out Hinduism. I'm sorry, Hinduism. Islam. Islam is probably, it's a harder one. It's a harder one because they encourage love. They encourage people to love each other. However, love of enemy and love of the other is not encouraged. From the Quran in, how do they say it? 60. Surah, thank you. Surah 60, thank you. In verse 1, O ye believe. And then he says, take not my enemies and yours as friends. Don't take your enemies as friends. Do not offer them love, even though they have rejected. Don't offering the love, even though they've rejected the truth that has come to you, and have, on the contrary, driven out the prophet and yourselves. Don't do that simply because ye believe in Allah. Basically saying it's not what we do. We do not love our enemies. This is the exact opposite. The Quran definitely mentions that Allah loves people, but only after they do what he desires. It is a earned love. Talk to most good Muslims, and they will tell you that their goal is not to necessarily be loved by God. Their goal is simply their good deeds outweigh their bad deeds. In other words, they're just trying to earn a place in heaven. And I've heard many of Muslims say that, and that tells me that it's not that love and encouragement of love is not the value. That it doesn't explain it, and that's actually the key point. So far, none of these have been able to explain why love exists and why it is central. So I want to suggest that biblical Christianity in premise 3 most completely explains and encourages this phenomenon of human love. Oh, crossed it off. It most explains this phenomenon. Because in Christianity, we see something very different. And when I mean biblical Christianity, coming from the Bible, the theology that has sprung out of biblical Christianity. And let's begin with I want to begin with the encouragement side, and I want to end in, I think, the strongest side, which is the explanation side. The encouragement side, that love is encouraged because the single most important biblical responsibility of humans is to love. This is the single most. We just talked about this, right? It's not about rules. In fact, even the rules are actually replaced with love, right? I mean, they're actually summed up in love. I don't mean replaced as if they're not valuable anymore. I might get in trouble there. But they're replaced. I mean, and look at Matthew 22, right? Jesus asked, teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart. He's encouraging love. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor, love of other. Both of these are love of other. But all the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. And in this, he's quoting Deuteronomy 6:5 and Leviticus 19:18. So he's actually quoting the ancient texts. He's not saying something new here. Ephesians 5. Okay, I mean, we can go on and on like this. Follow God's example. Okay, I'm encouraging you to do this. Therefore, as dearly loved children, walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. Walk in the way of love. Now, Jesus calls it a new commandment I give you. Love one another. He's not saying it's any different. It's been given before. But he says, as I have loved you, this is new and unique. So you must love one another. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for his friends. And then even talk about love of enemy. God demonstrated his own love for us. And by the way, I just love that this is, it's not past tense. It's not that he just demonstrated once a long time ago his love for us. He is demonstrating his love. He demonstrates it all the time. That while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. This is the love of God. And then, of course, the great love chapter. In 1 Corinthians 13, we find, of course, the illustration that without love, we're nothing. Without love, we're nothing. But then it takes the cardinal virtues, okay? And the cardinal virtues of any religion. And in verse 13, it says, and now these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. It's saying love is to be most encouraged. This is what we're to long for most. So clearly, Christianity puts love in a high place and encourages it. But here's the kicker. I think this one's one that I think puts this all and puts us in a way that I don't think any other religion can. Because not only does this argument point to a God, or theism, which so many do. I believe this argument actually points to the God of the Bible, to the God of the Christian worldview. And that is because of this point, that the Christian doctrine of the Trinity places love at the very center of all reality. You see, the Trinity is incredibly profound. And I'm not here to explain all the nuances of the Trinity. I believe Steve will do that next week. No. But I think I did hear him saying that they were going to talk about that coming up, right? Next month. Oh, it's somewhere else. Darn. Okay. You'll have to go to Fallbrook. But I know the Trinity's been talked about many times in here. The point is not to get to all the nuances of the Trinity and what it means, and I'm not going to justify it all biblically, which we could do and spend a lot of time doing. Instead, what I want to point out is that biblical Christianity and the Bible is the only book, is the only religion, only worldview that can say one very profound statement. It's the only one that can say God is love. Other religions can say God is loving, and some do. Islam does. It says that God is loving, but they cannot say that at the very core of reality, at who God is, that he is love. And that is simply because in Islam, if God is loving, he only learned love when he created humans, or when he created something other than himself, because he was alone and isolated before that. And love by nature, by necessity, it has to have someone else there. It has to have another to love. And what's beautiful about the Trinity is that from eternity past, God has been in a relationship of love. And that so that God never had to learn love. God did not need love. God did not create because he was lonely. He did not create because he was needy. He created out of love. It wasn't because of a lack of love he created. It was out of an abundance of love that he created. And that is the beautiful thing about the Christian faith, is that love is at the center of all reality. That God has been in a relationship of love forever. And I think that is the only reason he can say that he is love. He always has been. And so, therefore, I think biblical Christianity is the most credible worldview. And I'll let you decide if that is a strong argument or not. All right? Well, there you have it. There you have it.
We'll give you an A.
Yeah?
We'll reverse your philosophy grade.
You reverse my philosophy grade. Thank you. Thank you. I need that. I'm finally validated. No. All right. Well, okay, I guess I went a little, I didn't go the full time. Maybe half an hour. But questions, thoughts, responses to this? What?
Got one story?
You know that.
Was Dr. Seuss 20 years old without children when he said that thing about love being better than sleep?
So you're questioning whether love is that great, is really what you're saying. Is that? So you have. I get it.
The story is Dr. Seuss did not like children. Really?
Yeah. Another subject. Okay. You know the concept of agape love. Okay. So this is unconditional love. This is what Dr. Art Lindsley, says. The word agape is only once used as a noun in all of Greek literature in Jesus' time. Okay. So as a love. Or love not being a verb. I mean, I think it was used as a verb in other places, okay? But that God is love is using it as a noun, okay? So anyway, we have no parallel of it. Basically, Christians took this idea of agape and made it a central plank, put it right at the very core of the New Testament. Essentially, agape is a Christian invention. I think that's pretty profound. And now this is where I think of the religions of the world, and I think Gary was right that you can judge religions, and this is what I'm doing here, judging between them. And you look at the religions of the world, and you have to kind of just look at the worlds, at the societies through which are created out of these religions. Okay, and now, whether you like it or not, I know America is less Christian than we all like it to be, right? However, there is still, it's still much better to grow up in America than to grow up in almost any other part of the world, right? And that I think is a large part has to do with the Christian worldview that encourages love in a way that no one else does. And so I think we can go on and on about this. But yeah. All right. I did 30 minutes, man. That's all they told me to do.
Stay up here.
All right. Yeah.
Let me first express my appreciation for Josh. He gives such a fresh look at a topic and has so much fun with it, and it made it fun for all of us. And so thank you. I have an association with him in that my grandkids play roller hockey and his kids play roller hockey.
That's right.
And so we're there at the same place, and we're not paying attention to the game. We're talking theology, the two of us, the entire time.
It's true.
I love talking with Josh, and we have such a great time together. So, and he invited me at one time to come to the high school group, and we went to a mosque. And he took how many kids? 30 kids or 40?
Yeah.
And
30,
we went
40.
to a mosque and listened to them give their presentation. And then we came back, had lunch at Emanuel Faith, and then I got a chance to then undo everything that the imam had said to him.
Yeah.
And then...
Yeah, it was Imam Taha, who was there, who actually did this and said, and were you there that time? He said that your good deeds have to outweigh your bad deeds. And he said, I hope mine do. He has no assurance of that at all, and he's an imam.
And then he had me come back, and we went to the Mormon battalion and took it. Boy, there must have been like 50 kids that came to the Mormon battalion, and I got a chance to talk to them before they went and then after. And what was interesting before they went, I gave them the Greg Kokel question. I said, when they are giving their presentation, when they're done, and when they ask for questions, ask the what if and the why type questions. And let me give you an example. I said, if they talk about grace, ask them, what do you mean by that? So they had these two beautiful young girls give a presentation as missionaries, and then the adults gave a presentation, and it was all beautiful and well done, and they had PowerPoint with our name on it, Emanuel Faith, and everything was all set up for us. And then they asked for questions. And this one young man says, when you say grace, what do you mean by that? I'm sitting in the back, and I wanted to stand up and give him a standing ovation. It was so awesome. And this is what the Mormon adult said. He said, Jesus is not enough.
Yeah.
Dennis at the time was preaching a sermon series that was called Jesus is Enough. But he went on to say that you have to have works, just what Josh was talking about, that you have to have works in order to reach the highest heaven. So he's always had this passion for apologetics, and when he mentioned that he'd like to do a presentation, we jumped at it, and you can see why. And we'll have him back.
I'd love to.
Because he does such a great job. And the reason I have Gary up here is that we will answer questions. But one thing about next week we're going to talk on the issue of abortion. This is a crucial issue right at this moment. We all know, if you read the newspapers or listen to the news, It is headlining news all over. And Nathan Apodaca has come back from Jordan. I think he's in Texas right now, but he flies back here on the 9th, so he's going to be here next week. I will give a biblical case for why abortion is wrong. And then the majority of the time, Nathan is going to give a powerful evidence for why we should defend the life of the unborn. Nathan grew up here at Emanuel Faith. You've seen him here at the Apologetics group. He has become a monster in the area of pro-life apologetics. I have stood side by side with him, and we'll talk more about that on college campuses, defending the life of the unborn. He works for LTI, Life Training Institute. It has Scott Klusendorf is the foremost expert on the abortion issue. No one in Planned Parenthood can debate him because they've made a rule that you cannot debate Scott Klusendorf. Why? Because he kills them. He destroys them, and he's the nicest guy in the world. Scott is such a great guy, but he knows how to argue, and so they've made a rule that you can't argue with Scott Klusendorf. And Nathan is good friends with him. He's being mentored by Scott, and he blogs regularly for Life Training Institute. And so invite friends. You need to be here. It's going to be an important night because he is going to equip you to defend the life of the unborn. Question?
How do you spell Scott's last name?
Klusendorf. See if I can do it. It's Klusendorf.
Would he be on YouTube?
Oh gosh, all over YouTube. Okay, Klusendorf he is off the scale, okay? And he's taken Nathan under his wings. And so Nathan knows everybody I know that makes presentations on pro-life. Nathan says, "Oh yeah, I talk to him regularly." Nathan, who don't you know? He knows everybody.
Cool.
Yes.
That's cool.
What's Nathan's last name?
Apodaca, Apodaca.
Yeah.
You can find he has articles that he keeps writing, pro-life articles constantly, and we try to post them up on our EFCC Apologetics. Yeah, John?
Can you give an update on the unplanned movie? Do you know the numbers?
Okay. Yeah,
Number 4.
yeah, it moved to number 4. Peggy and I are going to go see it tomorrow, okay? This is a movie you need to go see. The movie Unplanned. Patty gave an update last week that was outstanding. It is the story of Abby Johnson, who was moving up the ladder in Planned Parenthood, was asked to observe or be in there to help out on a abortion, saw what it really does, and her whole life flipped. And so she is now an advocate for the life of the unborn. She is a follower of Jesus Christ. And everybody I've talked to says this is a must-see movie.
Where's it?
Escondido, I think, and San Marcos. I'm going to Escondido tomorrow at 4:45. If anybody wants to say hi, that's my plan, is to go at that time tomorrow in Escondido. Yeah, they have quite a few hours that it's available. Just look it up online. Yes.
Where do you also have Alan?
Schleman.
Somebody, I've heard rumors, but it's not confirmed that somebody has.
John Waring is looking into it.
Okay, they're looking into it.
Yeah, it's still in process. We'd like to, but.
He charges money.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, Nathan and Gary and Josh and I, we're free. Okay.
We're good for nothing.
We definitely are affordable. But you need to be here because next week, because this is an important issue. And bring your questions. We'll have time for questions. And because there's so many issues that have arisen in the last, weeks, days. I just looked up on the what's going on in Georgia with the heartbeat bill and the arguments that are going on there. And Alyssa Milano, I'll be talking about her next week because she's going to set us up. Believe it or not, she sets both Nathan and I up with her stupid statements. It's always good to have somebody say dumb things that really helps you in your cause.
You know, Nathan. Nathan also said that he's planning on bringing some people that do support things with different abortion, anti-abortion things. So if you want to get involved, instead of just hearing Nathan, there'll be some local groups that he's bringing some representatives.
Yes. Some of the
Tammy will be here. Oh, good.
Tammy from Alternatives will be here, and they'll have information, people to talk to, and you can find out ways that you can get involved. Now we'll just open it up to any questions. We've done that before. We haven't done it for a while. Yes.
Hinduism is on the rise amongst young people, and I understand it's because of yoga being very popular.
Yeah.
So what do you guys hear about that?
Yes, I've heard the same. I definitely have heard the same.
Well, the last I'd heard is that Buddhism is actually more popular and continues to be more popular. But I didn't know that Hinduism is moving up, huh?
Yeah, I was reading that, and I get the American Thinker newsletter, and that was an article saying Hinduism is on the rise and with young people.
Yeah.
And Buddhism I can understand because I lived in Japan, and when I came home, I had a really hard time readjusting to rude Americans. It's such a gentle society, so I can see why it would be more popular.
Yeah.
I wrote a book called about the Japanese Americans who were forced out of San Diego, and in my fictional setting, one of the things that convinced one of the Japanese the son of a Japanese couple was that Buddhism does not encourage a personal relationship with God, and that is exactly the opposite of what Jesus Christ came, was to establish a personal relationship, and so that's a huge factor in Buddhism.
Yeah, Buddhism is a real impersonal kind of faith. You can be an atheist and be a Buddhist. I mean, you don't need God. Just the Eightfold Path. You're just working your way. And you're trying to get rid of a desire, which always seemed odd to me because you're working hard to get rid of a desire. Isn't that a desire? So I don't know. I don't know how that plays out.
Other questions? Any topic is open.
I saw the movie last night, and I, of course, have never seen an abortion, and they showed abortion happening on the ultrasound. And you see the baby in the womb starting to flail, and then all of a sudden, with the suction, it's gone. And I was like so shocked. And it was so hard to see that. It was very emotional.
There is a movie that you can watch on YouTube called The Silent Scream, which actually shows real.
Evidently, this was a special effect that they did.
The CG, so it shows it.
In this issue is the fact that most of us do not want to see images or hear about images because they're so gruesome and it's upsetting to a lot of people. But if we keep this issue at just the argument level, it doesn't have the impact. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that next week. Is because I have been with Nathan and I have been on college campuses with the Genocide Awareness Project, where you stand in front of these big signs. And I'm not going to bring the big signs with graphic images. I'm going to show you the big signs from the back where you don't see anything. But these are aborted fetuses. These are real life photos. And it's very upsetting. It's emotional. We get criticized for it. But with somebody who is for abortion, they're criticizing the truth. They're angry at the truth. It's right there that this is the result of an abortion. And so I'll talk more about that project.
There was a newspaper reporter who went to cover the story and the movie. So hold on.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
That he said he would have to do some thinking because he was very pro-abortion before he saw the movie.
as a newspaper reporter. This whole
The visual aspect changes minds. When people see it, they then become pro-life. Many, of course not all, because when we go on college campuses, they just get angry and scream at us. But many will become pro-life, not necessarily by the arguments that we present. We make the arguments, but I'll tell you, the images are a big part of it. Yes.
Yes, I belong to North County Conservative, and we had the opportunity to watch the movie Gosnell. Has anybody ever heard about it? It's
I'd like to see Gosnell.
Yeah, now Gosnell was a doctor who, when the abortion went south, physically murdered the baby outside the womb. And he's in prison now for murder. But we have this issue going on where now they, instead of murdering the baby in, I think, was it Tennessee?
It was in Philadelphia.
Was it Philadelphia, where he said that once the baby is born, it's between the mother and the doctor whether they just let the baby expire and die without any help. I mean, this is sick stuff, but this is where the direction many are going, or too many are going, leaders are going. The public is against it. When they take surveys on late-term abortions, the public is overwhelmingly against late-term abortions, but we have so many in leadership, certain politicians that are pushing it in a certain direction, and it's very sad. And that's not even abortion, that's infanticide once the baby's born. It's the born alive bill, and killing a baby once it's born alive or allowing it to die is murder. Yes.
There's a huge thing in government about overpopulation on the planet. Yeah. The UN's Agenda 21 talks about having to reduce our population. So the people in government are getting filled with that information, and that's why we see our leaders in one place, people in another place.
Yes.
We saw the movie Unplanned yesterday. I agree about the abortion. It was horrific. But one of the other things that was so disturbing to me was a man came out with barrels of baby parts. Barrels that big around, 2 of them with baby parts. And people asked if they could pray over those parts in that barrel. Because they were just all legs and arms and heads and spines of babies. It was, I mean, you didn't see the parts of the baby, but you knew what was in there. Because in the movie you see the nurses putting the babies together, so here's the legs and here's the arms. They were picking them up with tweezers, putting them together because they didn't want any part to be left in the mother.
And the ultrasound is a requirement by Planned Parenthood, and they don't let the woman see it. Mm-hmm. It's to make sure that there's no parts left on the side.
Right, and so it's back to these images, and let me give you one qualifier here. We're not going to be here next week trying to use images to gross anybody out. We're not going to use images, okay? I've got the posters from behind. We believe everybody here in this room is pro-life, and you don't need to be convinced about the horrific situations that are going on right now. And when we're on campuses with those posters, there are signs all over campuses. Do not go in this area if you don't want to see graphic images. There's signs. And presenters like Klusendorf and Kokel, when they do a presentation, will tell you, we're going to show a film, a short 2-minute film without any sound. You can turn away, you can leave the room for those 2 minutes. We'll call you back if you but they still will use the graphic images, but only with permission. They will never use it and force anybody like those baby parts. not force anybody to see something, and we don't either. We have signs all over the campus that say, do not go here if you don't want to see certain graphic images.
Well, if you go to that movie, be prepared because you will see it.
Yeah, and you can close your eyes, and it's good to have that warning so that when that scene comes up, you can look away or close your eyes if you don't want to see it. And it's understandable. It is horrific to see a scene like that. But that's what it takes to move in today's society, a visual society. This is how people change their minds when they see it.
The visual. So I think the statistic is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not, but like 80% of the women who go in for abortions that see an ultrasound with their baby decide not to get the abortion. And there were states that were trying to pass it where you must see the ultrasound before you can get an abortion, and of course that got knocked down. But and maybe someone else, but I remember reading that like 80% of women that go in for an abortion and they see the baby, they decide.
Yes.
Places like alternatives, but not.
Right. No, not a Planned Parenthood. No, they banned it. But like I said, there were 2 states that passed a law that said you must see it, and of course it got shut down.
Well, you can see how important this issue is and why I would encourage you to maybe invite a friend. Nathan really knows his stuff. If you saw him before, about 3 years ago, we had him come and he answered every question, and he is so precise, so well read, knows so much about the topic that you can come with your hardest questions and Nathan is prepared to answer them. So I'm excited he's coming, and then hopefully they'll arrange this thing with Alan Schleiman, who works for Stand to Reason. He's another expert. Alan and Nathan know each other quite well, and the more we can hear on this topic, the better equipped we can be to stand up for the life of the unborn.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. They also mentioned in the movie that when there are prayer people at Planned Parenthood, when there's demonstrating for Planned Parenthood, their business drops by 70% that day.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to start getting out there.
Yes, and you're like we said, Nathan has friends that are going to be here. More than one group will be here with information, how you can get involved. So it won't just be head knowledge. You'll get an opportunity to say, I'm in, and how can I help? And so, again, you won't have to, but we'll make that available with Nathan and his friends. We'll take one more question, and then we can...
Yeah, a couple of years ago, a young man exposed Planned Parenthood at a luncheon with 2 or 3 of the individuals. Oh, yeah. We're talking about the parts and how much they're worth and so forth. Now he's being, Planned Parenthood is going after him. Said legally he shouldn't be doing that.
Right, and so that young man exposed the truth, and so they're trying to sue him for exposing the truth of what they do. All right, well, let me pray. And we can talk more, and there's lots of great goodies. Father, first and foremost, we're so thankful that you are a God of love. You love everyone. You love all of us, and those who love you back are well-pleasing in your sight, and that you sent your Son to die for all those who have bent their knee to Jesus. And we're thankful for grace and for that love. And we're praying for Nathan as he comes back from Texas on the 9th. Give him a safe flight. And for many people to be here next week, and the groups that are coming to share their resources. God, just empower Nathan as he speaks on this difficult issue of abortion, and how we as believers in Jesus Christ can defend the life of the unborn. And I just pray that you will use him mightily in Jesus' name. Amen.